got a 2009 F350 dually. Gonna do front brake pads and rotors. It's a rear-wheel drive, two-wheel drive. So I have to remove the rotor and the bearings in the front. What you want to do is get a 5/8 16 millimeter socket and remove the caliper bolts right here. Remove them. And then you want to get a 21 millimeter deep and a breaker bar and brake deck. Caliper mounting brackets, bolts. Loosen them up, and then take them out. You take this whole unit as a complete unit because it's got the plastic pistons, and then there's little notches on the pads. And to pry the caliper off without pushing the piston in or remove them together, remove the tension on the pad onto the rotor, and then chip your pistons. Okay? So what you need to do is take the caliper bolts out, 5/8 16 millimeter. Break your 21 millimeter bolts, caliper bracket bolts. There's one here and one down below. Take them loose and then take them off. Hold on to your calipers so it doesn't fall and hang on by the brake hose. It's pretty heavy. Okay. Caliper bracket bolts, pretty beefy. Okay. Okay. Pull the bracket assembly out of the caliper. Sometimes these are plastic, sometimes they're not, but these happen to be metal. But here's the two little tits on the pads that make it hard to pull them off, pull that bracket off without taking them off at the same time. Okay, because these get hung up in here when you're trying to pull the caliper off without pushing the pistons in. Okay, so we got that out. Now we need to push the pistons in, and we'll need to clean up our caliper brackets where the slides are for the hardware. Okay, that's what you need to clean up. Get that rust out of there. Alright. Inside here, get that rust out to get it nice and clean and shiny. And then when you get that done, then you need to make sure your slide pins aren't frozen. You take them out, put some seal glide on them, dialytic grease, or sometimes the grease that comes with the pads. Okay? You just pull right out. Okay? You know, lube up your spots on your boots so they'll have some lubrication on them, so they'll slide around. So they'll slide around and spin properly. Okay? If they're frozen, you have to replace the caliper bracket. Most likely complete caliper and bracket assembly. If you replace one, you might as well do both sides. Okay, I got the caliper brackets cleaned up. Still need to lube the slides. And now I'm going to paint that area that I removed the rust. I'll put some paint on. Okay, I got them painted. And I put some seal glide on my pins. Do not fill this up with seal glide. You'll never get the pistons, these slides pushed in all the way to stick it out, and you'll have a hard time getting your caliper back on. Spin them as you push them in. Push them all the way in so they're all the way up. Okay. So that's good. Now we'll do to push the pistons back in. Okay, get yourself a big clamp. Put the whole pad in there. Put the clamp on here. Start tightening it up, and as you tighten it up, it'll push the pistons in. Make sure your lines aren't too pinched, or it restricts the flow of the fluid back into the system. Okay. Okay, the pistons are pushed all the way in. Now you can remove your clamp. Okay. Since this is a real vehicle, not a 4x4, you'll have to take the bearing cap off the side here and undo the bearings. GMs that have a hole, and here's you can get access to the bearing cap. This is a Ford, they don't give you it. You just stick a pry bar in there, give it a quick zap, and it'll come off. Okay.
Got the dust cover off, dust cap off. The next thing you need to do is remove the cotter pin inside there. You gotta squeeze the two ends together and then pull the cotter pin out with side cuts, wire cutters. Pull the cotter pin out and then remove your dust cap. Okay, cotter pin out, dust the nut retainer off. Loosen up your nut. It's inside there. Okay, you loosen the nut up with a pair of pliers, and you can take it out with your fingers. And then when you get the nut off, be careful that the rotor doesn't slip off and land on your foot. Okay? So now I got the nut out. I'll stick my hand in here and I'll hold the bearing. And I'll grab hold of the back side of the rotor and pull the whole unit off. Okay, I got the bearing in my hand. Put it down. Now I need to do is flip it up and get this bearing out so I can clean my bearings. That's inside the dust seal. So you get a big flat blade screwdriver. Pry that up. Stick a flat blade screwdriver in there. Twist it. And it comes up. Now you can take your bearings and clean them up with mineral spirits. Do not use gasoline. Okay? After you get them cleaned up, blow them out with some air. Do not spin them. Then you can rinse them out with some mineral spirits again and then blow them out with some more air. But do not spin the bearing in your hand. Okay? With the air. Okay. Okay. You got the rotor off. You got the bearings over there in the washer solvent, cleaning it. Not wash solvent, but the parts cleaner. Some mineral spirits, and then you want to get the clean off your spindle. Get a clean rag, wipe them off. Wipe it all the way off around it. Okay. Nice and clean. So what you want to do is you want to put some fresh grease on here and wrap it around the sides right here where the seal rides and on the bearing surface. Where the race of the bearing goes on there. Put some grease on there. Okay? And you want to clean up your bearings. Mineral spirits. Or parts washer container. Get it all cleaned up. Okay, when you get the bearing out of the race, you want to look at the race, which is the cone. You want to look for pits. Pits or chatter marks. No pits or chatter marks, that means the race is good. That means the bearing should be good. And then you want to clean up your bearings, get them all cleaned up, and you want to look at the bearing surfaces. You want to see if you see any chunks missing in them or flat spots. You know, they look good, that means they're both good, and you can reuse them. Okay? You'll see them if they got them. You'll be able to feel it. So what I'll do is I'll blow them out with some air, but I'll hold on to the bearing so the bearing doesn't spin in my hand. You can get these bearings spinning really fast, and then they can possibly come apart and cut your fingers really good. Even off, so don't spin them with air, just blow them out with air. I blow them out with air 2 times and I'll wash them out until I know they're clean, and then I'll clean them out with some brake clean, blow them out, and then I'll pack them with new grease. Here's my clean wheel bearings. No more grease, no more oil film on them. And I'll blow them out and clean them, and then I'll do my final cleaning with some brake clean. Okay? I'm going to get new rotors. I'm going to throw these into the scrap for recycle. But when you get your new ones, make sure they match and they have the trigger wheel on there for the ABS. Okay? Sometimes the rotors don't want to come off. It's really tough to come off. So you have to kind of like stick a bar in there and pry them out between the knuckle and the rotor. And when you do that, you might want to thread your nut on there, just like one thread. When you do break it off, break it loose, so it doesn't fall off and land on your foot. So this is the reason why, because the bearing sticks to the spindle. So you break it loose. What you're doing is you're breaking the seal loose from the rotor. So you can take off your jam nut and get your rotor out of the way, and then you'll have to pull off your bearing off the spindle. So it's on there pretty good, so you need to get a pry bar in here and tap on the pry bar to get so the pry bar is resting against the brace of the bearing. Okay, and then you can tap it off that way with a hammer, or you can stick a pry bar in there, get in there, and then you work it back and forth like this, and it'll eventually work its way off. Okay. Yeah, when you're cleaning up your spindles, you can clean up your ABS sensor too. Wipe off all the metal particles and dust off of it. Okay. Let's just say that you were driving and your front bearings smoked. They're smoking and they were bad. And your wheel is real wobbly. And your front wheel bearings are bad. Let's just imagine that they are. So what you want to do is, if you can get the rotor off, and then you want to do, and this bearing is seized down to the spindle, what you do is you cut the cage off, get the cage with the rollers, you get the cage and the rollers, get them out of the way, then you just cut an inner race. What you do is you gotta get a die grinder and you slice it at an angle, you put a groove in it, you know, deep as you can get it. Try not to cut into the spindle. If you cut into it a little bit, that's fine. But get into it as much as possible and try not to cut into that one. But you do it at an angle so you get more of a cut. Okay? An angle like that. Okay? Get it all the way in there. When you get it pretty deep, then you want to take a nice beefy chisel and stick it inside your cut groove. And smack it with a hammer really hard, a 3-pound sledge, and that will crack that race the rest of the way, so then you can tap it off with a chisel, you know. And if it still doesn't come off good, then you can cut the other side, do the same way on the other side, and hit it with a hammer with the chisel, and finish cracking it off, and you'll get it off there. And when you do get it off, then you can clean it up with some sandpaper and emery cloth until your new bearing slides on there nicely. Okay? Okay, time to pack the bearing. You have this type. Use a grease gun. Put the bearing on there like that. You screw this down tight. And it's centered in there. And then you pump it full of grease until grease comes out the top and the bottom. Okay? What it wants to do, it wants to come up through the top, and then down through the sides and out through here. Okay? So when it comes out the bottom of that cage, that's when you know it's got enough grease in it. If you don't have one of these, then you'll need to use the grease in the hand. Fill your hand full of grease and take the bearing and scrape your palm of your hand like that. So you're forcing the grease through the cage and the race, up and out, and just work your way around, you know, so you get the grease coming out all the way around. And when that happens, it's full of grease. And then when you get your rotor, you put a little bit of grease, not a whole bunch, just a little bit of grease, maybe 2 tablespoons around the races. Okay? And then on your seal, you want to put grease around your lip of your seal before you push it in. Okay? Alright, you got your new rotors. Make sure you clean them with soap and water or some Windex or some degreaser. Clean out inside there where the bearings go. Make sure there's no metal particles in there. And then throw some grease inside there on your races, inner and outer. Get that done. And then you want to put your bearing in there, your inner bearing, all packed and ready to go. Put that in there. And then you want to match up your seal, make sure it looks exactly the same. And then we'll go on there and you tap it on the sides around here with a punch and a hammer. Or if you have a race, you can hit the race on here, put the seal in. And then you got that done. Then you want to go over to your pads, match your pads up to your old ones, and put your clips on, your abundant clips properly. So this piece is sitting in the back side, not to the front. If it goes to the front, it'll be hitting the pad, the rotor. So you want this piece sticking this way. Alright, so you got those done. You tap your seal in, and you have to install it on your spindle. I tap the seal in around with a hammer, and then I'll use a punch to finish it off and go all the way around. Make sure it's flat, it's in there properly. And then what you want to do when you're done with that, put some grease on your spindle, and then you want to pick up your rotor and put it on your spindle. And then you have to grab your outer race, and your washer, and your nut, and get the nut started. Okay, so this is pretty big nuts, 1 inch and 7/16. If you got a socket that size, that'd be great, and use that to help tighten up your bearing, and also set your bearing preload. So before you put your rotor up there, you want to have your bearing and your flat washer. See the notch on it? Goes on a notch on the spindle. It's a flat spot. Need to line that up. So have all this by your spindle area, so when you put your rotor on, you don't have to disappear and go find this stuff. It should be right there, easy access for you. All you do is just put it on, and then grab your bearing, put your bearing in, and then your washer, and then your nut. Don't put the washer on the bearing and try to start it, because it just won't happen. So put the bearing in, push it in there all the way, and then put your washer on, and then get your nut started. And then as you're tightening the nut, you want to spin your rotor, tighten it up. You tighten it up to like, 25 foot-pounds, and spin it, and then back it off, just like a quarter turn, just so it's loose, and then snug it back up. You don't want to bear down on it, you just want to snug it up, okay? And that's your wheel bearing preload, okay? And then you'll put your it's like a castle nut, but it's not a castle nut. You want to put this on there and line up the holes for these notches for your cotter pin, okay? The hole in the spindle, and you want to find space in here to line it up and put your cotter pin in. The cotter pin you want, make sure it fits into the hole. Okay, not too sloppy and not too small. Okay. It has to be long enough to go like that. Okay, so you can bend it over. Okay. Okay, so you got it in there. See the cutter pin on the top of it, and there's the bottom of it. What I want to do is grab the bottom of it, which will probably be the long end of it, and I want to bend it like that. See it how it's bent right here? Bend that up. As long as you bend one side, that's fine. Okay? Now you can put your dust cap back on. Here's your dust cap. What you want to do is you want to put it in there, line it up in there, and you got it lined up. You take your end of your hammer and you tap the edge that's sticking out farther in. Like this is like sitting in there like that. You want to hit this section of it, pound it in there, boom. Use your handle of your hammer. Or you can get a piece of wood like this, like a 1/2 by 1.5. And stick that in there and hit it with a hammer. Stick it in there like that. Hit it all the way around so it's flush, and it sounds the same when you're hitting it with a hammer. Okay? And then stick your finger in there and roll it around and make sure that it's flush all the way, equally, all the way around. Okay? And you got that done. And you need to clean out your rotor with some soap or some degreaser or even some glass cleaner. Okay? Next, you want to put on your caliper bracket. I really cleaned it up, painted them, put some seal glide in there on the slide pins. Here's your caliper bracket bolts, 21mm head. Put them in, there's 2 of them. Snug them up, and then you want to torque them to 120 foot-pounds. Double check your torque specs. I'll just give you a ballpark. Right idea. Okay, so you got those torqued. Then all you do is put your pads in there. I got my abundant clip on my pads already. There's no inner or outer, they're all the same on this model. So you put them in there. These act like little springs. They push up against the bracket and it pushes the pad out a little bit, so you gotta hold them on there. Okay. Okay, I got the pads in. See how they act. Put them on there like so. See how they are? It's like little springs. Okay. The clips go on there. You want to hold it together, and then you want to pick up your caliper and put it on there and make sure your line is not twisted. Okay, I got my caliper on. My line is not twisted, it's nice. This lower bolt go down there. There's no correlation or anything because he's got the flats on the pins. Doesn't matter. There's no, it's got a flat, but it doesn't actually affect it. See the flat right here in the caliper and the flat on the pin. And some vehicles they'll need to be lined up, but on this one you don't have to be lined up. Okay, so you got them in. You want to snug these up, and then you want to torque these to 20 foot-pounds. Double check your torque spec. Okay, got your caliper bolts tight. Okay. Everything looks good. Got your dust cap back on, your cotter pin in, your bearing preload set. No grease on your rotors. The hose isn't twisted. All you need to do is straighten your wheel out and then put your tire back on. And these are torqued to 140 foot-pounds each. And that's how you do your brakes. Just do the other side the same way. And good luck. If I was any help, please subscribe. That way I know I'm helping somebody. Thank you.